a informal, open, fluid discussion, looking at what body of work and the programme of the work the GSA should now undertake. So for those of you that do not know me, my name is Kerry Hallard and I'm the Chief Exec of the GSA. I'm joined today by the Chair and Vice Chair of the Contracting Workstream. So Tom and Philip, please say hi.
Hi.
Hello, morning.
I'm
everybody.
Philip. I'm Philip, by the way.
Excellent. So these guys are going to steer the discussion. I was just going to do a very brief intro. So the Global Sourcing Association has recently launched its revised manifesto, and it's manifesto in response to COVID-19. So for those of you that weren't on that, please do have a look at it. It's actually published on the homepage of our website, and it really does describe just how well our industry responded to COVID-19, but also how important we believe both technology services, business services, and strategic sourcing are going to be to help companies through their restart strategies and be a solution to helping companies out of obviously the very difficult situation lots of us find ourselves in. So so part of that body of work, the central theme is continuing to look at the move towards a strategic sourcing function and how important that is. We've recently done some research, and 77% of our members say that the trend towards strategic sourcing is going to continue. And within and underneath that umbrella theme, we have launched a number of different work streams. So we've launched a work stream that's looking at talent, attracting more people into strategic sourcing, as well as upskilling people in strategic sourcing. We've got Sourcing Tech series, which is looking at all the different technologies that will help companies innovate and transform a lot better, and how you actually bring those technologies into your sourcing arrangements and how you contract for those technologies. And then we've also got work streams on what work streams have we got? Why am I having a blank? Abby, tell me what other work streams we've got. We've got work streams on wellness, on sustainability, done the talent one. Yeah, inclusion and diversity, and an entrepreneurs club looking at the sourcing ecosystem and bringing more smaller players in. So we've got all of these different work streams, and contracting is one of the work streams. Now, we had a contracting work stream a couple of years ago, and that was really focused on 3 areas. One area was looking at moving towards Gsa Standard Terms. Another was looking at developing best practice guides on complex contracting issues, such as contracting for AI and intellectual property. And then we also had a blue sky thinking stream within the contracting work stream, which was looking at new ways of contracting. So whether that be the relational contract, or whether that would be the paperless contract even. And what we wanted to do was actually look at what body of work the GSA now needs to do in its contracting work stream to help organisations in their restart strategies. So so just to, before I hand over to you, Tom, just to bring up to date with some of the research that GSA has undertaken. Our members are saying that 71% of our members believe they're going to undertake contract and scope realignments as a result of COVID-19. 48% are looking at contract extensions, and 87% are looking at how do they innovate more, and 56% are looking to work to shorter length contracts. So that's time, not the length of the size of the contract. So so that was my sort of like backdrop. I really want to hand it over to you guys as the industry professionals to understand what you're seeing and what you think would be a great programme of work for the GSA to work on and deliver to help the membership moving forward. So, Tom, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think we want to use today just to sort of get people's views on what we could best be doing. I've got some views, but it'd be useful just to hear from everybody on the call. Would it be? I think it'd be helpful just to hear if everyone could just quickly introduce themselves. That would be useful, just to quickly say who they are and what their background is. Shall I shout out? And I've got the list of names here. Should we start with Amanda?
Hi. Yeah, so my name's Amanda Claridge and I work at Peru Consulting as a consultant. within the sourcing and commercial space.
And what's your back? Are you a lawyer or a contract
So I did
person or
study for at university, and I was at 3 years at Shoesmith's law firm, and then I've been in a number of project management roles at Travis Perkins and at Seva Logistics.
Right. Oh, okay. So you've got a good range of different contracting experience then. Brilliant. Okay. Jerome.
Hi there, this is Showroom Bolte. I work as a contract manager at Entity Data Services. And
sorry, just where did you say your company is? You just cut out.
Entity Data Services.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm responsible for the contract management in Ireland as a local area. And I do a lot in the financial sector.
Right. Okay. That's useful. Chris Bates.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, Chris Bates here. I'm a partner at Ashurst. I'm the head of our strategic sourcing function and part of our digital economy transactions group.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Chris Smith.
Yeah, morning, everybody. I'm another Peru consultant. My background is, first of all, I worked for a service provider, then I worked at Gartner for a good while. My background, I suppose I'm an IT economist, really, so it's helping organisations save money in IT, a lot of it in their supplier arrangements, so I've got involved in lots of contractual benchmarks, contract optimisation, those kinds of things.
Very interesting. We've got a good range of people then today. Colin?
Hi, yeah, I'm Colin Nelson. I'm the outsource manager for customer experience at John Lewis. So fairly new to this side of things, but I attended a couple of the seminars in the last year or so with my immediate line manager, Graham, who has also done some of the hosting some of the sessions at one over in Belfast. So I'm probably more from a learning point of view, more of a bystander on this one, I'm afraid, just to try and learn from you guys, the experts.
No problem. Dominic.
Morning, everybody. Dominic Dryden from CMS, which is a law firm.
Great.
And, my practice is a bit like everybody else, strategic sourcing.
Then Imran. You're on mute, I think.
Thank you, good spot. Another lawyer to add to the mix. Hi everyone, Imran Syed, partner in the technology and sourcing team at DLA Piper.
Oh, great. Okay. So we've got DLA, CMS, and Ashurst, as well as Eversheds, which is good. So lots of law firm experience. Orla.
Hi there.
Can't hear you very well, Orla.
Sorry, any better?
That's a bit better. Yeah, lovely.
Sorry about that. I'm a business development executive at PLT, the law firm, specifically working in relation to public sector, but I do sort of a lot of other areas as well.
We just lost the start of that. I heard public sector.
Sorry, I work in business development at PLT, the law firm.
Oh right, okay. TLT. You say?
Yeah.
Perfect. Right, good. And then finally, Steve in southern Italy. You wish.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, so Steve Watson, I'm principal consultant at Peru Consulting. I head up Peru sourcing and commercial management practice, and that includes all of our sourcing and commercial propositions services, effectively.
Right. Okay. So we've got a good range of supplier. We've got supplier, got a customer with John Lewis, and we've got a good range of law firms. So between us, we've got a fair amount of contracting experience. So I suppose the first question is the research that Kerry mentioned at the start, which is people wanting shorter contracts in terms of time and looking to do scope changes and extract more for less. Is that what people are seeing generally? Because that certainly reflects what I'm seeing in terms of not necessarily shorter in time, but an ability to get out and an ability to be more flexible in contracts is something that I'm seeing with a lot of our clients, either looking to kind of renegotiate contracts, change the scope, or at the start of new ones have less of a commitment in terms of the time. So flexibility is critical. I don't know whether are you seeing that, are any of you seeing that sort of as a trend, or is that the wrong things? Is that not what you're seeing?
So Tom, it's Steve. I'll come in on that one if I may. So they're not represented on today's call, but our channel partners, Future Processing, we've discussed this with them on a number of occasions, and they're definitely seeing that trend. So just for your benefit, Future Processing are a fairly large bespoke software development house based out of Poland, but 50% of their client base is in the UK. And they're seeing a definite trend towards existing clients wanting to renegotiate the terms of current contracts, whether that be payment holidays, whether that be some other more favourable terms, and new clients being very wary of entering into long-term contractual arrangements. And it's particularly acute in certain lines of business. So, for example, a significant percentage of FP's revenue comes from parking solutions. And as you can imagine, in the current environment, parking, particularly in city centres, has been significantly impacted. And therefore, that's reflecting in those buyers' behaviours in terms of contracting and not wanting to enter into long-term arrangements.
Are other people seeing that?
Yes, I think so, Tom. From DLA, similar to you, probably not necessarily shorter in terms of the amount of time on the term, but more flexibility. So the ability to exit and dealing with volume change through the contracts probably a bit more dynamically than previously.
Interesting.
Hi,
Yeah,
it's Chris here. Sorry, I'll just jump in
Chris.
as well. Yeah, I think that probably reflects what I'm seeing. I think it's less about committing to less of a term. It's more about just making sure that there's an increased focus on how to get out, and there's a much greater focus than previously on the what if scenarios, on things that could go wrong. Because I think a lot of people are looking at their contracts going into COVID going, well, we just didn't have anything in here that sort of even considered this possibility. And so I think that's maybe opened people's minds a little bit to looking at what they should be including in their contracts to produce that flexibility and not necessarily just going for the sort of same old boilerplate provisions.
And are you seeing people taking more of an interest in business continuity plans then? Because I've certainly seen people going, oh, wish we'd thought of that. Or when we said business continuity plan to follow, we wish we'd actually gone through the pain of writing it and insisting that our suppliers wrote it.
Well, you feel a bit like, this is what you've been banging on about for the last 10, 15 years, that this is really something that you should have done at the outset. And exit planning, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Exit continuity, I think, is perhaps the principal focus shift from me for getting into contracting. So I've got a bit of a mixed bag in terms of people getting in for the long term versus getting in for a shorter term, but everyone is focused on making sure that the exit continuity is sorted.
Yes, yeah, and interestingly, Philip, I know you've done a lot of work on exit planning, haven't you? So that you couldn't have said a better thing there, Chris, in terms of making Philip's day. Philip, do you want to explain what you've done on the exit planning side of things?
Right. Okay. So the GSA has for many years sort of had a lot of feedback from people about exit and how you go about it and the importance of it. And as you rightly say, this is now possibly proving the time when all this good stuff is coming to the fore. So about 2 or 3 years ago, I and Paul O'Hare of Kemp Little jointly wrote a best practice guide to exit, thinking about exit planning, and we did it like a sort of like a sort of A to Z guide on it. So it starts from when you're doing the contract right through to contract management, right through to actually how you actually handle an exit and the negotiations around one. So that is a currently published document, and Kerry will hopefully tell me that it's the new version is due to be published any day. But the GSA is very interested in exit, and if that's something that can be enhanced further, then there is a stream of work or stream of people, i.e. me, to do it.
So Philip, yeah, it's being published this week. I've just got to chase up the designer to get the prettified version of it back, and I'll share that with everybody as soon as I've received it. So thank you very much for all your work on that. It's awesome.
So just coming back to the business continuity planning, do you think we should be putting more effort into raising awareness of business continuity planning, or do you think a global pandemic has done that for us in terms of making people aware of the importance of it, or do you think there could be something we could do around helping raise awareness of how to develop them and what to put in them?
I think from my perspective, it's more about just the messaging and the focus of what we might be able to contribute, because I think everyone's kind of acutely aware of the need for business continuity. So I'm not sure it's a raising awareness point as much as it is a helping to understand how it's supposed to work and what you're supposed to do. And that may be just a sort of slightly semantic distinction, but I think from my perspective, it is more about, okay, everyone's seen business continuity in action. And actually, perhaps a point for debate, I think by and large, the sort of feedback I've been getting from clients is that their business continuity plans for the events that have unfolded have actually worked quite well. People have transitioned to working remotely, and the operational technology has been such that actually it's come through very almost seamlessly. And therefore, is there a risk for discussion that people might become more relaxed about business continuity on the basis that they've seen a global pandemic happen and have found that everything is going to be all right, sort of thing?
You see, Chris, I would say the opposite, because I think that a couple of clients that I helped with as soon as when COVID sort of struck and people or suppliers were thinking about sort of migrating their support to working from home, I think that they had a hard look at the business continuity plans, and actually that they were okay, but they didn't really deal with some of the things that the suppliers were sort of facing, like, for example, the security issues that arise from working from home versus working in the office, and more physical than technical. But small things like that you wouldn't necessarily, or you with hindsight, it's easy to say yes, we should have seen it coming and planned for it, but actually there were different things that the business continuity plan had provided for. So I think people can probably learn from this scenario and do better.
I'll completely agree with that. I'm not, and perhaps I didn't make myself clear on the point that I was making, but I think the issue that we've got is what is included in the plan absolutely needs to be improved, and how to implement one properly. I think the perhaps the danger that I was alluding to is that people have sort of muddled through, and things have by and large, sort of gone without a huge amount of hiccups for the vast majority of people. And certainly that's the sort of feedback that I've been getting. So I think the point I was making really was that there is a need to guard against that complacency.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. And the other thing that we think we may see later on in the year is, I think people, as you say, have muddled through. They've worked with their suppliers effectively to keep things going, but I'm not convinced people have documented stuff terribly well. So it may be that You know,
Yeah, I
they've
completely
agreed
agree with that.
in the heat of the moment. They've said, okay, well, can we just waive service levels for three? Or can we have reduced service levels? Are you okay that we're all working from home? Yeah, fine, just get it up and running. But in 6 months' time, will people still feel that way? You know, so certainly our litigators are seeing a sort of slight hardening of attitudes, both customer and supply side, and seeing arguments about money and service levels. So, you know, there is perhaps a tidying up piece as well around. So one around BCP.
Yeah.
You know, what are the lessons learned? How could we? Most people do have a plan of sorts, but it probably didn't cater for the fact that everyone would be working from home. It was usually around one site going down. So there's kind of lessons learned, and what have we learned from BCP going forwards? And then also, is there stuff we should be doing as an organisation now to help people thinking about documenting, going back and doing a tidy up, effectively going through all their contracts and saying, okay, well, we've varied these, but have we actually written any of this stuff down? So, I mean, that's something we could perhaps, Kerry, look at over the summer, do you think, in terms of messaging to our membership?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was just looking at some additional stats from the research, and we didn't actually ask about BCP, but 63% said they would improve their focus on risk management. So kind of aligned there.
Yes.
I think one of the things that this all sort of talks to, and Tom, I completely agree with you about the point that there'll be a lot of stuff that hasn't necessarily been properly written down.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, you know what, we'll just make it work for now, and we'll just stick a, you know, sort of sticking plaster over things to make sure everything stays up. And perhaps there is an alignment here to, you know, how does one emerge from COVID from a contracting perspective as well, because obviously everyone's looking at the exit plan on a, you know, sort of national health basis, but also on a sort of business continuity and in fact a sort of returning to what the new normal is, or going back to the way things were. How do you effectively sort of take your relationship that exists now with your supplier or your customer, and, you know, sort of I either sort of draw a line under what you conceive to be temporary measures to keep the lights on, or, you know, to return you back to levels of service that were there previously.
Yes. Yeah. And then look at potentially more flexible models for how you can work, because people were suppliers were incredibly flexible, weren't they, at the time, and so were customers. But I suppose, how do you take some of those benefits and keep those benefits longer term? Interesting. There's a couple of other things I've wanted to just perhaps touch on this morning. I think we've got an hour, haven't we? One was, I know Kerry's always very keen for us to look at different models of contracting, and different industries look at these things, whether it's kind of, you hear talk of alliancing models and Project 13 in the engineering world. So I'd be interested to see whether anyone's looking at other types of contract models. And the second area I'd quite like to just talk about is how deals are done, and whether we can be more effective on how we put deals together, because I think we've all probably got the scars of long and painful negotiations, and you know, lawyers get pretty bad rap normally for that, but actually quite often it's a combination of problems on when deals are painful to negotiate. It's probably also important to look at the process and lessons learned around that. So could we just look at those two areas in the next 25 minutes or so? So first of all, on different contracting models, are any of you seeing a sort of request from suppliers or customers to move to a different type of model for contracting?
I can just come in there. It's Steve again. Rather than sort of talk about demand, I can talk about a thought piece that we put out recently, based on some feedback again from a couple of potential customers, a couple of suppliers. is in this environment where there's a marked reluctance to enter into long-term contracts. We've talked about the concept of the endless contract, which might sound like a bit of a paradox, but actually what we mean by that is a contract that has no predetermined term at the outset, but where both parties agree to review on a regular basis, say quarterly, maybe is relaxing that to half yearly, and review whether the contract is still fit for purpose in terms of its the services offered, the commercial terms, and the degree of innovation and flexibility. So it allows both parties to do a reset if external conditions dictate, and if they don't, then happy days, they can continue. But where they do, they can decide how the contract may need to change, or indeed if it's just impossible for one party to shift sufficiently, they may decide at that point to wind down the contract and exit the contract. So it's kind of moving away from a time-based contract to a fitness for purpose-based contract, where you're regularly reassessing the fitness for purpose.
And what and Steve, what are the, sorry, who was someone about to say something then?
that was me. It's Chris. It was an interesting concept. I was just wondering how that worked in the context of revenue recognition.
Well, that's always historically been the barrier. The bean counters would like to know where the revenue is coming from and for how long. But consider the alternative is no revenue at all. Then actually, it is something to think about.
Interesting.
If you're faced with the choice of not being able to enter into a contract with a customer, or entering in on these terms, I would suggest these terms are preferable.
It also raises a bit of a problem for customers because they can't plan their pricing. It's a problem for everybody, actually. I mean, you can do it, but obviously, I think the frequency is the problem.
Yes, yeah, you'd have to look at the parameters in which I'm not suggesting it's a free for all. There may be certain parameters you'd put around commercial terms, around service, etc., etc. But it's just in a sense, it's replicating what happens in the real world. There are some clients who've been with the same suppliers for decades. Now that might have spanned multiple contracts, but what's happened over that period of time is, as perhaps one contract with that supplier is drawn to a close, the supplier has approached the customer and said, hey, we're going to offer you something new, something better, something shinier, improved commercial terms, improved service terms, and they've re-signed a new contract, and they've done it again, and they've done it again, and they've done it again. So it's essentially a more granular version of what actually happens in contracting, where there are successful supplier-customer relationships already in place.
But I've seen that. Yeah, I mean, it's part of the exit guide. Funnily enough, you mentioned that point. I mean, it's a great idea, but I don't think it can be. Customers ask for pricing, and they want very keen pricing, and they can only get it if there's a minimum length term to allow the supplier to make a profit, which of course is. Dare I say, we always do have this problem of customers wanting, suppliers to operate on very low margins, but they want, they're not sometimes prepared to give the suppliers, enough time to make a sensible profit, which in turn leads to other problems like lack of innovation, etc., etc.
So, Steve, on this model, is there always like a rolling right to terminate on like 6 months' notice? Then is that what keeps you honest then in terms of?
Again, the devil would be in the detail. So if, for example, you built certain guardrails into the contract, which say, yes, we'll review it on a 6 monthly basis, but, the service can only vary by X% and the price can only vary by Y%, then if those tolerances were exceeded in any review, then that would trigger potential right to exit, yes.
Yes, yeah. I was just wondering what, Colin, what would work at John Lewis in terms of how you say you've not been there very long, but what do you think would be a model that could work in terms of like a rolling contract? Would that be the sort of thing that might work for you, or do you need more certainty over your supplier base?
I think it's quite difficult to say. I think based on probably similar experiences to what's been shared already, I think it would be quite difficult for those who want to, manage the finances behind it. It would be quite difficult to move to that. But Yeah, I've not had a great deal of experience within the actual negotiating the contracts, having that insight to offer. Unfortunately, I'm afraid. So I'll probably just I'll pass on that just now, if that's okay, just to hear from others.
Yeah, no problem. What about Jerome at NTT? What would work for you on this?
Yeah, I think that a term that is not set maybe can work for certain industries or certain type of products, but and my experience, especially in the financial sector, banking, insurance companies, is really based on trust on its application services, its BPO, and those kind of contracts are, as also was mentioned, it's you give a price on basis of number of years that you can set the term. The better the length, the better the price you can give.
Exactly.
So for the sector I'm in, it's IT in the financial sector. It's definitely not
The other little bit of a problem on this is the cost of exit, which is not cheap. So you don't want to be doing that too many times, or you don't want to be forced into it too many times.
I suppose for Steve, going back to Steve's model though, I suppose for the right kind of service, or if it's easier to swap in and out, then I could see that would be give you a great deal of flexibility. If you need a longer term commitment from your supplier, or as a customer, or as a supplier, you need you want better quality of revenue recognition, then it may not work. But an interesting model, isn't it?
Potentially, is it perhaps a model that could operate well with a sort of a relationship which requires a lower degree of integration between the sort of customer and supplier partners? Because I think that what I'm hearing from various people is that the sort of the model falls over the more complex the relationship is. And so perhaps there is I mean, Steve, back to you really for your thoughts on that. Is there a degree of, sort of higher suitability for that sort of model where you've got a relationship which can be, where real efficiencies can be created, but not necessarily requiring a deeper level of integration?
I think you're correct. Perhaps more loosely coupled relationships will be more successful with this model, and also the other kind of warning sign for this sort of model would be if one party or the other has to make a big upfront investment. So the typical sort of 7-year transformation deals where the supplier has to invest a significant amount of money and only recoups its investment at the later end of the contract. Clearly, that type of deal isn't going to work particularly well. However, the pricing point doesn't come back on the pricing point. This old conundrum of sort of keenest price in return for longest commitment. You can actually reverse engineer that. So you might go into one of these arrangements in the first year and the price point is set at X. But if you then find yourself still in the arrangement in year 2, you might say, well, it's now X minus 5% or X minus 2.5%. And if you get into the third year, then it might be X minus 3% and so on and so forth. So you can still engineer in those pricing trade-offs. You just do it kind of almost in a reverse manner. You do it after the fact, in a sense, and the fact being the continued commitment of the customer.
Interesting. Yeah. What about other models? Anyone seeing any other models? Alliancing, or has anyone heard of Project 13, which is I think that's from the Institute of, let me just get that. Yeah, Institute of Engineers. That's in the construction sphere. They're trying to move to a slightly different model. I'm not sure how successful that's been, but anything anybody else is seeing?
So from speaking to a few of our advisory members, the sourcing advisors are saying that they are seeing a trend towards alliances. So yeah, be interested to see if that should be something we investigate a bit further or not. So Dominic, have you seen anything on alliances?
Alliance contracting has always been a bit of a mystery to me, if I'm honest. I'm not quite sure exactly what it means. I mean, look, I think my experience is that that everybody is constantly looking for ways in order to increase efficiency around contracting, whether that's you know, in a multi-supply environment, whether that's trying to drive as much commonality into a set of terms for use, or whether that's trying to pre-agree as much in a bilateral relationship as possible, so that it doesn't have to be revisited on successive ordering. I mean, alliance is, well, Tom, I mean, I don't know. You mentioned it first. What do we think alliancing is?
I was hoping you'd tell me.
Well, I think, as far as I can tell, it's a way, isn't it? Isn't it sort of it's efficiency, it's productivity, it's better, you know, it's better relationships, it's you know, it's all of the above. I'm not sure.
But I mean, you usually find whenever you get these new models, but you all ultimately then, when you drill down, you say, well, who's doing what? So you need to have a list of kind of either dependencies or responsibilities. Who's paying for what? So you need to have a section that deals with the money, and who's responsible for what in terms of liability. So we put this on the list today because we wanted to see whether other people are seeing anything that's actually any different from a normal contract. But you know, I like you, Dominic, I've always struggled to work out what it actually is.
Well, the nearest I've come across it is multi-tower IT management, that sort of thing, where you do have to lay out quite a lot of principles about governance, cooperation, and a lot of that sort of stuff. So that's the nearest thing I've ever seen to it. The thing about engineering, though, because I deal with engineering quite a bit, is that engineering contracts are usually on standard forms.
Yeah.
ICE is one, you know, JCT, etc., etc. Certainly in the engineering sector, they are pretty much renowned for producing fair standard forms. So they are built to be fair from the start. I mean, there's obviously a very good reason for that, which is you can't renegotiate these things all the time when you're just doing, you know, relatively routine engineering. But that industry does have that, dare I say, starting advantage, which is that they start off working with contractual terms which are inherently fair across for both sides.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Agree with that. Absolutely agree with that.
Well, that's something that we started at the Gsa Contracting Workstream a couple of years ago, was moving towards Gsa Standard Terms. Philip, you were involved in that project, weren't you? Is that something that we perhaps should resurrect and continue?
Yes, if the GSA is wanting to take the view that it wants to set a standard of, you know, good standard, you know, fair and reasonable terms, and sort of, you know, if you like, push the same agenda as the engineering sector does in terms of, you know, contract words, then that's something that we could do, without a doubt. I mean, just so far, for everybody's benefit, just so far we have published best practice guides in certain areas and given examples of clauses and things that people need to think about. And again, they've been written on the idea that, you know, people need to play fair in these areas like intellectual property and a few other things. So that would be a way forward. I think we need to, you know, be clear that if we're going to do it, there's quite a lot of work involved in it, and we'd obviously have to promote it. Otherwise, we just end up producing a precedent which people possibly don't use. So I think we just need to be a bit careful about that.
I think what's important is to promote the benefits. So if I can give you my experience or Peru's experience, we've been called into multiple clients where the relationship with the supplier is broken down for one or other stated reasons. And it almost always is the case that the stated reasons aren't the real reasons. When we get in and look at the contract, it's typically because the contract has been biased towards one or other of the parties, either the supplier or the customer. Yeah, so eventually that contract fails because there isn't a balance of rights and benefits. So I think we can do more to promote the fact, move away from this old thinking of, I win, you lose, zero-sum games, to actually the best contract you can have is one that's fair on both partners and it's fair throughout the term of the agreement, not just at the start, or the end, or the middle, right the way through, because that is the sort of contract that's likely to survive the full term and actually help the supplier-customer relationship develop.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
I agree with both of you, and also I particularly agree with Philip about the point that it is a huge amount of work to get this going. I think I could see there being real benefit to having a standard position on a lot of clauses, or a suite of types of clauses you could go for, or positions, and that would certainly save people an awful lot of time. But that's a big investment of time and effort by the GSA to do that, and then to promote it and keep it up to date as well, because contracts do kind of need regular updating.
One option would be to run a competition and offer some sort of prize for examples of clauses.
That would be a good idea.
But I suppose the question is, do we feel that if we did this work, and I mean, I'm quite happy to volunteer to do some of it. Do we feel it's worthwhile doing? Because as somebody just said, I mean, it is the thing is, we are promoting the best practice. We can certainly draft clauses, but people need to think, well, where's best practice in contracts? Okay, we'll go to the GSA. So it is promoting, I think, is the key thing. Otherwise, it'll just sit on the website and
again, just to reiterate, I think before you invest your hard-earned time in it, we need to actually sell the benefits. And if it becomes clear that people are recognizing the benefits and the outcomes, that to me is the green light to then actually put the effort in.
Sorry, was there just to check, was that a suggestion that we draft some sort of bank of, or precedent, or bank of clauses, or something like that? But I caught the tail end of it. I just wonder if there aren't already sources for that kind of thing out there, because there are lots of sources. But I think the far greater benefit from these kinds of things is to have principles around best practice and doing things the right way and doing things the most productive way, because there are all sorts of contracts, pro this, pro that, shades of this, shades of that, and I just think there are trying to cover it all under one umbrella could be a real challenge, and actually not end up being particularly well used.
That's my fear.
Yeah,
I mean, we have done work on. I mean, the one I particularly led on was intellectual property, to try and get around this, this concept of, customers particularly say, well, I'm paying, so therefore I own, and sort of trying to produce clauses that, recognise the supplier's legitimate interests in intellectual property and his background information and stuff like that. And we've done that on a few other areas as well. So I think there is a question whether we do a standard form, or do we try and just do what we have done so far, which is to try and produce best practice thinking and fair thinking in certain aspects of the agreement. So as I say, we've done intellectual property liability, termination, and a couple of other things.
And will you go one stage further and get members to sign up and say this is like a charter of good behaviour?
Yeah, because when we started this off, I mean, I think I said at a meeting, it'd be great if the GSA, if the perception in the sourcing world was right, okay, so where can we sort of try and solve some of these conundrums? Oh well, let's see what the GSA say. What do they think is the best sort of practice in this area? So I mean, if we ever got to a situation like that, I'd be delighted.
Yeah, and that would actually be pretty helpful, actually, because sometimes you just reach an impasse on some of these negotiations. So that could be helpful guidance.
Yeah. I mean, like all lawyers, and I'm, stick my hand up. Yeah, sometimes you just need somewhere else to go to sort of, justify a position, possibly even to your own client.
So I think it's right. I think it's about principles rather than specific detailed clauses. So you kind of always put together the principles of fair contract and fair contracting, and that would be a higher level exercise and would provide a framework under which individual contracts, following those principles could be formed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Any other thoughts? Either of the Chris's have a view, or Imran?
No, I think I would agree with that. I think you can get lost into the clauses and try and create something that's a bit too prescriptive for the market, and actually having a general set of principles sounds like a good idea in order to kind of help focus those thoughts and those conversations.
Yeah, I echo what's been said, particularly the point that there's already precedent out there and easily available. I think what we can do to add value is to give people some sensible guidance about how they should navigate situations rather than necessarily give them the words to it.
Yeah, I think that's all very helpful. And they only just have 5 minutes on process and how deals are managed, because I have a kind of bugbear that lawyers get involved too late in the process quite a lot of the time. I mean, I've got a great example at the moment where we were asked to review a pensions administration outsourcing 10 months into the negotiations, where they wanted to sign it the next week, and they just said, "Oh, read this. It's only worth 2 or 3 billion, but read this and tell us it's fine." So
get your holy water out and bless it.
Well, exactly. We read it and told them it was crap, and they shouldn't have started from where they started. And then, typically the lawyers get a whole load of abuse for making life difficult. But actually, we've done a kind of learning from experience process with the client and said, well, really, is it sensible to negotiate for 10 months without any legal input, to have down selected? Well, they did all the mistakes there. They down selected to one supplier. They were desperate to move. They'd not actually kept any competitive tension. They used the wrong document, and then they negotiated it badly. But what comes out of that is, oh, outsourcing's a nightmare. We just can't do it. It's, lawyers are difficult. And actually, I think outsourcing gets a pretty bad rap because it's complicated to do these outsourcing projects well. But I think a lot of people don't help themselves because they make the process so poor. So I'm wondering whether there's a piece of work we could do around not just best practice for doing the contract, but actually how do you negotiate it as well, and tips around not down.
I could not agree more, and I think that actually we could really take the lead from our sourcing specialists on the call about just getting to a position where sourcing best practice is operated as well as contracting best practice. The number of deals where clients come to you and say, effectively, we've already selected the supplier and we just need to start the negotiations. The concept of zero competitive tension is one that is so prevalent across particularly IT deals, I think. That it would be really helpful perhaps to give some better guidance on the art of actual procurement and sourcing, as well as the contracting piece.
That's really helpful, because the analogy I always say to clients is, when you want to buy a car, you don't go into the Mercedes showroom and say, that is the car I want. You tell me what model I should get and how much I should pay. You go in and say, I'm not sure I want to buy this Mercedes or this Range Rover or this Ford. tell me why I should buy it. And then, that's how you negotiate buying a car. And yet when you're doing a multi-million-pound outsourcing, all the basics of negotiation seem to go out of people's heads because they get stuck on the fact that it's a long contract and they just want to get on with it. But I think there's a lot of really poor practice around contracting. So I don't know whether that's within this group, Kerry, but there's a lot of the problems we have on contracts is because they're done really badly rather than what goes in them. I think in terms of the process.
So I'm just smiling there because we just put out an article a couple of months ago, back in May, called "The 7 Deadly Sins of Major Contract Procurement." Number 1 was don't run a competitive process. Number 2 was don't have a sourcing strategy. Number 3 was don't be clear about what you want to buy. Number 4 was don't engage or test the marketplace. Number 5 was don't be realistic about the timescales and effort involved.
Yeah.
Number 6 was don't stay close to your incumbent supplier. And number 7 was don't have a clear evaluation process. And that might seem so noddy, but the number of times I've seen those basic elements failed in purchasing organisations is unreal.
So to be fair to the purchasers, because I work a lot with highly qualified, CIPS qualified people, it's not them that's usually the issue. It's the stakeholders.
Yes, exactly.
It's always the stakeholders. It's not a lot of places have good processes, but as the stakeholders start shortening them,
railroading it. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So in terms of how we pull all this together, I think there's sort of a couple of things that have come out this morning, aren't there? There's I think it might have been Chris that said that whole piece around how do you emerge from COVID? How do we emerge from COVID from a contracting perspective? And that pulls in BCP, tidying up the paperwork in terms of documenting changes that you've agreed, and also exit planning. So that's quite a neat piece. We talked about different models, but actually we moved then into best practice guides. So that's the second piece, I think, isn't it? And then the third piece is around sort of sourcing best practice. Really, those sound like the 3 themes that have come out of this, unless I've missed anything.
I agree with that. I just wonder that there is, to Steve's point, there is so much literature out there about sourcing best practice, and so much of it sounds so noddy, and yet consistently people continue to get it wrong. How do we, if that third work stream goes forward, how do we create something that is sufficiently different or insightful that separates it from the volumes that are out there already and therefore gets noticed? Because if we're essentially just sort of recycling, for want of a less pejorative word, existing wisdom about these things, how do we do so in a way that makes people take notice?
Yeah. I think the point was well made. It's not the procurement organisations that are at fault here. It's the stakeholders who railroad them. So anything we put out needs to be targeted at the stakeholders, not the procurement organisations.
Okay, so obviously the
consequences of their actions.
The GSA's got the Global Strategic Sourcing Standard, and what we've done is we've made that freely available. So that used to only be available to a high-level professional member, membership base, but now we're making that freely available to everybody, whether they're a member of the GSA or not. So it's just us making a lot more noise about that being available for organisations to use and assess their performance against any part of the life cycle. Colin, I know you sort of said, I don't know huge amounts about contracting and negotiating them and things like that, so I don't want to put you on the spot for something difficult, but would you agree with the conversation that you're hearing here vis-a-vis what's going on at John Lewis? Is it more an issue with stakeholders, or again, is this something you don't feel comfortable commenting on?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not probably not the best place to answer these questions, but I'm definitely enjoying hearing the different opinions on it. It's probably above my level at the moment, but Graham, well, he was quite keen for myself and the rest of the team to come on and try and learn a bit more, because I think he's got a vision to kind of put us in the position of being involved in these conversations. So my my role at the moment is more about managing the relationship after the contracts are in place, so to speak. So I do appreciate all the insight, but sorry, I've not got a lot to bring to the
No,
table.
that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. So, well, sorry to hijack your agenda a little bit, Tom, but one other thing that we were doing before was looking at blue sky thinking towards contracting. So that was looking at the use of blockchain in contracting, or the use of artificial intelligence in contracting. Is that something that we should sort of like look at in terms of a futures view? So I see we've got some things we could do immediately, but is that something that we should roll into the agenda for once we've done these immediate actions, or not?
Well, is it a cup of tea for everybody, or is that just,
Yeah,
just for you?
that was Mrs. Allery, yes.
Sorry, to answer your question though, yes, I think we should. I think we definitely should have that in the sort of in the medium term. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Is there anything else in the remaining minute you think we need to add to the agenda for anyone on here?
I suppose the only other thing, Tom, is I'll be looking for volunteers to help us out.
Good point. Yep. Anyone anyone want to put their hand up?
Yeah, why not? Usual suspect.
Yep, happy to be involved.
Who was that? Just said happy.
Chris Bates.
Chris Bates, brilliant. Okay, fantastic.
Likewise, Imran from DLA.
Okay, so we've got Chris, Bates, Imran, sorry, who? Steve.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steve, as in Steve Watson.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Right.
Right. So should we? What do you think, Kerry? Should we work up an agenda for like a follow-up call with people who've volunteered and see how we kind of and bring some of this to life? Is that the best thing to do?
So Abby's online. She's our new events manager. So sorry, I haven't introduced you a little bit earlier. Sorry for that, Abby, but you are now properly introduced.
That's okay.
So Abby will be doing the summary write-up, and we'll distribute that to everybody. And yeah, we will we'll look at calling for more help from the broader community. We did have a lot more people that wanted to participate and get involved, but obviously couldn't actually make this 11 o'clock slot on Monday morning. So I think we've got more volunteers in the midst. So we'll distribute that and then suggest a time to follow up with those that have immediately volunteered to help on this agenda, but we'll keep the communications about the broader picture and what we need to do with the broader group.
Great. Yeah, lovely. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Kerry and Tom.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody.
See ya.